It has been nearly 2 years since Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar took over as Minister of State for Electronics and IT, Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Over the last 2 years, we have seen him work relentlessly and tirelessly with razor-sharp focus on driving India's digital agenda. He's been closely involved with key pieces of digital legislation, the Draft Digital India Bill and Draft Digital Personal Data Protection Bill. I'm Momita Bakshi Chatterjee and I have with me Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, and we are going to discuss his 2-year tenure in this ministry. So many thanks for speaking to PTI. Looking back, how do you describe your journey in this ministry? What have been the key moments that have stood out for you?
No, look, I think there are several moments that have been extremely satisfying. But I think most importantly, just as we are coming out of this historic visit of the Prime Minister to the US, and almost a very significant part of that visit was about technology and the future of technology. And I think that type of clarity in our Prime Minister and his leadership about what technology can do for India, what technology can do for Indians, and what technology can do for our economy and our global standing has certainly been very, very, very deeply impactful in terms of what this ministry has been able to do. So if you ask me what are the various highlights, I think clearly early on in those 2 years when I was given this opportunity to serve in the Council of Ministers, it is the understanding that the Prime Minister's vision for technology in general and in various sectors in particular was so focused and so clear that my job as a minister in this ministry became one of really communicating his vision and in a sense following up and getting the policies for that vision to be materialized. So that was one. The second thing that clearly over the last 2 years, and I experience this almost every day and on all my visits, is the energy, the confidence and the almost impressive determination of young startups and young Indians all over the country. And if you look back at this historic visit of our Prime Minister to the US and scratch your head and said, is this the same India that we used to know before 2014? And what is so different about this India where the US is rolling out the red carpet and we are creating these strategic partnerships for the future of technology? It is A, this Prime Minister and his vision, and B, this whole ecosystem of young Indians that are translating that vision every day into real startups, real innovation and real achievement. So I think those two I have seen up close in the last 2 years and have left an absolutely indelible impression on and a sense of confidence about the future.
What are the key milestones for you, not only in terms of those that are personally fulfilling for you, but also in terms of how they have strengthened India's digital ambitions?
I think one clear thing is for me to have played a small role, or the ministry to have played a small role in the overall vision of making sure that the Indian digital economy is a lot more than ITES, which it was in 2014. And today, looking back at this tech economy and looking back at the Indian digital economy, we are present, India is present, Indians are present, young startups are present in almost every segment of what we consider emerging technologies, deep tech, and the digital economy and the ecosystem in general. Whether it is AI, whether it is microelectronics, whether it's high performance computing, whether it's quantum, whether it is things like semiconductor design and microelectronics design innovation. Almost every space there is startup activity. Almost every space there is Indians who are innovating and are the leading pack. So I think that is certainly a very fulfilling thing to look back, that the Indian digital economy, the Indian innovation sector that was always very globally known for its IT and ITES is today also recognized for the tremendously deep capabilities that young Indians and startups and our talent pool is now able to develop at scale and show to the world. One classic example is the India Stack. The India Stack, which is really an innovation that had its root in solving a governance problem that the Prime Minister wanted to solve, which is about payments to citizens, is now a stack that is being wanted for reforming digital governance by many governments all around the world. So that type of innovation capability and that type of innovation reputation has been built in the last 9 years is certainly very fulfilling, and for me to have played some role in the last 2 years in broadening that capability, talking about semiconductors, talking about building a semiconductor ecosystem, and being a participant in creating these design startups, welcoming these big investments into in assembly of memory chips. These are all certainly very fulfilling.
We are celebrating 9 years of Digital India. What's next? Is there a Digital India Pro Max?
Well, I think certainly the fact that the last, there's an interesting statement by Sundar Pichai in the White House, and when they asked him about Digital India, he said, look, the fact that the world is today embracing the vision that the Honorable Prime Minister had in 2015, that digitalization is going to drive the world, that the digital economies are going to be such a significant part of the global economic order, that he saw it way back in 2015, and now even the big companies are racing to understand that. So I think we have been very blessed in a way to have this kind of vision clarity. I feel that we are still at the tip of an iceberg of what our digital economy can be. We were at about 4 to 5% of the total GDP in 2014. The target that the Prime Minister has set for us is to become 20% of the total GDP by 2026. I think we are on track because we are already at 10% this year. And the extent of digitalization of our government, governance and economy is only going to accelerate even more. I think this process of digitalization will continue. Our innovation economy is going to continue to expand. The successes that we have had over 2 decades after Y2K on the ITS front will play out in electronics manufacturing, in semiconductor manufacturing and design, and all of these other deep tech areas, including but not limited to AI. And so therefore, I think there's a lot of headroom to grow. We talk about 104 unicorns and 1 lakh startups. I think the target is really 1 lakh unicorns and almost 10 lakh startups or 20 lakh startups. So that is the kind of opportunity that the India Techade really represents for young Indians. And I am deeply excited that I am at least getting to contribute at least a little bit to that journey of this country and for thousands and millions of young Indians.
What will be government's approach to the digital competition law? And what would be the role of MCA versus IT ministry? I mean, MCA and IT ministry.
Look, first of all, and we just had a meeting recently with the Honorable Finance Minister. Look, one of the first things I want to clarify to everybody who looks at this from the outside is that every piece of legislation for the digital economy or the cyberspace, whichever way you want to characterize it, is an all-of-government approach. So there is no silo that one ministry does something or the other ministry does something. Our approach is to create a very harmonized way of creating a legislative framework. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. There is no part of the economy, whether you are in health or you're in education or you're in agriculture or you're in pure tech, that tech is not going to be there as part of your business model or part of your business. So therefore, there is no MCA view of cyberspace. As you know, we have clearly established 3 ground rules, principles, guardrails for everything we do on the cyberspace. One is openness, the other is safety and trust, and the third is accountability. So certainly the principles of openness, which is free and fair competition, no abuse of market power, no use of no distortion of consumer choice, are all within the realm of competition law. And there are some limitations in the existing competition law that do not allow the competition law to deal with things that are ex ante, which is before the impact. And so therefore, there is this healthy discussion between the MCA and the MeitY. And we hope that the competition aspects of the Digital India Act, the openness principle that we will lay down in the Act, will be dealt with institutionally by the Competition Commission and legislatively by the competition law or whatever amendment which is referred to as the digital competition law. So that is how we are working, that almost a certain component of the DIA will be dealt with by the Digital Competition Act.
So under the draft digital India bill, will fact checkers have to get registered with the government? Could you set the record straight on that?
I don't want to set any record straight, but I can certainly give you some guiding principles which I've already put out during the pre-consultation. I'll share that with you, which is that we expect the Digital India Act to basically classify the internet into various types of intermediaries, various classes of intermediaries. And each of these intermediaries, because they'll be unique, they'll have unique characteristics, they will have very different types of regulations that they'll have to comply with. So therefore, it is certainly clear that fact checkers will be one class of intermediaries. Just like e-commerce will be, internet service providers will be, and many other platforms will be. So you will have these classes of intermediaries. Fact-checking intermediaries will certainly be one area of intermediaries that we are considering to include as a class of intermediary, and they will be regulated through a very separate set of regulations compared to, let's say, social media intermediary.
But they don't need to get registered today.
No, they don't need to be registered
Do they
today.
need to get registered under
And that is part of the problem, because how do you determine who's a fact checker? If you and I suddenly wake up in the morning and say, I want to fact check everything, and then I contradict everything in the PTI puts out. So there has to be some accountability. If the moment you are an intermediary on the internet, the principle is that you have to be accountable for what you do. If you do something wrong, there have to be some consequences. I'm not saying consequences have to be criminal or consequences have to be financial, but it cannot be the case that the moment you get onto the internet, you can do and say anything without fear of any consequence. That you can pretend one day to be a fact checker, the next day you can pretend to be something else and cause misinformation and harm and proliferate that without having any kind of accountability. And I think that is a model whose time has come to set in a sense, to have a sunset on that and create a much more transparent, much more accountable framework where every intermediary has a right to grow, has the right to do his or her thing, to innovate, to expand on the internet, but also be very aware of what the guardrails are. And the guardrails are that you should not impact openness, you should not impact the safety and trust of the digital Nagari, and you are always going to be accountable for what you do. And if you do something wrong, you are going to be accountable for it.
Let's go back to where we started as we wrap up. Any unfinished agenda, anything that you're passionate about personally that you'd like to do in the next couple of months? Next few months?
No. Look, the Digital India Act is a piece of legislation. We want to certainly in the India AI program to launch that in a very big way with the India Datasets program. The quantum mission, we are working closely with the Department of Science and Technology. High performance computing with CDAC is really going at high speed. So there is a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of progress to be made. And in a lot of ways, the Prime Minister has raised the bar for everybody with the Indo-US agreements on ISET, which basically covers high-performance computing, quantum, semiconductor, and AI. All of those areas that we are working in. So there's plenty of work to be done, and there's a lot of people, a lot of startups, and a lot of young people, including from academia and the ministry, who are all very focused and committed to delivering on Prime Minister's goals.
Thank you so much for speaking to PTI, sir. We wish you the very best.
Thank you, Mata.